Maya Thompson, 42 years old, stands as a living testament to strength and resilience. Once a lieutenant colonel in the military, she faced grueling battles on the Afghanistan front lines, fighting not just enemies abroad, but also confronting the inner battles within herself. She carries both visible wounds and invisible scars of the soul. Yet instead of letting those wounds break her, Maya transformed them into fuel for her ongoing fight, no longer on the battlefield, but in courtrooms and legislative halls. Today, Maya is a civil rights attorney, a passionate advocate who crafts laws designed to protect people like her, those often overlooked, unjustly treated because of their race or background. Her story isn't just about being a soldier or a lawyer. It's about a woman relentlessly striving to build a fairer, more humane society. Maya knows justice isn't just written in legal text. It's powered by courage, determination, and an unwavering heart. Her journey inspires us all, reminding us that no matter the darkness, the light of justice and bravery can always break through. Before we dive into today's story, please leave a comment to let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. This helps us understand how far the story has spread and how many people it has reached. Now let's discover the story together. Damn. The sun hung low over Detroit that day, casting a soft golden glow on a crowd gathered with heavy hearts. The air was thick with silence, a silence that spoke louder than any words. Families, friends, and fellow service members stood shoulder to shoulder, sharing grief and respect for the fallen hero. Flags fluttered gently in the breeze, and the distant sound of a bugle playing taps sent a chill down the spine of everyone present. In the midst of this solemn gathering stood Maya Thompson, her posture steady, her eyes reflecting a profound mix of sorrow and resolve. She was not just attending a funeral. She was there as a symbol of strength and advocacy for all who had served. Maya's presence was a beacon of hope and dignity for the community. Her role was more than that of a mourner. She represented the voice of justice that echoed beyond the ceremony, reminding everyone why such sacrifices must never be in vain. Around her, families clutched each other tightly. Children stared wide-eyed at the military honor guard, understanding little but sensing the gravity of the moment. Veterans exchanged knowing glances, their own memories flickering beneath stoic expressions. The funeral was not just a farewell. It was a powerful reminder of the price paid by those who wore the uniform and of the responsibility that the living carry forward to honor, to protect, and to fight for a society where equality and respect are not just ideals, but realities. As Maya looked around the crowd, she felt the weight of history and the promise of change intertwined in that quiet moment, a moment that would soon be shattered by an unexpected and shocking event. Usayan. Among the crowd at the funeral stood Officer David Harris, a 30-year-old police officer whose uniform bore the weight of both authority and burden. To the casual observer, he was just another guardian of the law, but beneath that exterior lay a man wrestling with pressures few could truly understand. David's days were filled with long shifts, rapid decisions, and an ever-present sense of scrutiny. The thin blue line he stood behind often felt like a tightrope stretched over a chasm of expectations, fear, and sometimes prejudice. In the high-stakes environment of modern law enforcement, stress is a constant companion. David carried it silently, each call, each encounter, layering tension onto his shoulders, sharpening nerves that had little room left to breathe. Sometimes those pressures twisted perception. Split-second judgments clouded by implicit biases or fear could turn routine situations into confrontations. It was a harsh reality officers like David faced every day, a reality where mistakes could escalate with devastating consequences. Behind the badge, David was not immune to the flaws of human nature. The struggle between duty and doubt, between protocol and instinct, shaped his every action. In the complex maze of policing errors were not just possible, they were inevitable. This inner turmoil set the stage for the fateful moment at the funeral, a moment where the intersection of stress, bias, and authority would ignite a chain of events that no one could have anticipated. Understanding David's story doesn't excuse his actions. It deepens the narrative, showing how systemic issues in policing contribute to tragic incidents. It reminds us that reform is not just about punishing individuals, but healing and reshaping the whole system. Detroit was no stranger to tension layered beneath its streets, like a simmering heat waiting to ignite. Within this complex urban tapestry lived David Harris, a 30-year-old police officer whose uniform was a symbol of authority, but also a heavy mantle of burden. To many, he was just another face in the force, but inside him brewed a storm shaped by years of pressures and unseen battles. David's journey into law enforcement began with idealism. He dreamed of making his community safer, upholding justice, and being a beacon of protection. Yet reality quickly complicated that vision. Days turned into long nights filled with sirens, distress calls, and the constant need to make split-second decisions. The badge that once represented hope became a weight pressing on his every move. The nature of modern policing thrust David into an environment where stress was constant, unrelenting, and often invisible to those outside the force. The sheer volume of calls, the unpredictability of danger, and the scrutiny from both public and superiors created a pressure cooker situation. Each encounter, no matter how routine, carried the potential for life-altering consequences for both the community and the officer. What many don't see are the mental scars left by this relentless pressure. David wrestled daily with anxiety fatigue and an undercurrent of fear, not just for his own safety, but for the possibility of making a fatal mistake. The line between vigilance and paranoia blurred, amplified by the implicit biases ingrained through culture and training. These biases, though often unconscious, shaped perceptions and influenced actions sometimes detrimentally. David was not inherently a man of malice, but he was human, flawed, and vulnerable. Behind his stern exterior lay insecurities and a mind worn thin by the demands of his role. The department's culture, which often emphasized toughness and quick action over empathy, further complicated his ability to process complex social interactions. In high-stress moments, the default response skewed toward control and caution, frequently at the expense of understanding. His personal life mirrored this turmoil. Long hours, emotional exhaustion, and the stigma against seeking help left David isolated. The walls he built to shield himself from the harsh realities of his work inadvertently trapped him in a cycle of stress and poor judgment. The burden of expectation, both internal and external, was crushing. In this context, mistakes were not just possible, they were inevitable. The very system designed to protect could distort decision-making under pressure, especially when coupled with racial prejudices. Officer Harris's story exemplifies this dangerous intersection. It's a narrative of a young man caught in a web of systemic failures where fear and bias cloud judgment and can lead to catastrophic consequences. This backdrop set the stage for the fateful moment at the military funeral in Detroit, a scene meant for honor and mourning that would soon become a crucible, revealing the deep fractures within law enforcement and society. That morning, as Maya Thompson stood with the solemn crowd, David approached, his mind racing. Fatigue weighed on his limbs, and a mixture of anxiety and unresolved tension gnawed at his composure. The solemnity of the event was lost on him. His focus was narrowed, filtered through layers of suspicion and instinct honed in a high-pressure career. The first signs were subtle, a wary glance, a tightening grip on his service weapon, but soon escalated. David's implicit biases, stoked by years of experience and societal conditioning, triggered an overreaction. He saw Maya not as a fellow American deserving respect, but through a lens distorted by racial prejudice and fear. In those moments, the power dynamics of authority met the reality of human error. David's actions, rushing forward, drawing his weapon, weren't merely the product of individual choice, but the culmination of systemic pressures and unaddressed psychological strain. This incident underscores the critical importance of understanding the full picture behind law enforcement actions. It's not about excusing misconduct, but about illuminating the roots of such behavior to foster meaningful reform. Officer Harris's story is a powerful example of how stress, bias, and institutional failures collide, often with tragic results. As the scene unfolded, witnesses held their breath. What was meant to be a ceremony honoring sacrifice turned into a moment of crisis, one that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. David's confrontation with Maya was more than a clash between two individuals. It was a reflection of the broader struggles faced by communities and law enforcement alike. It exposed the urgent need for systemic change through better training, mental health support, and an unwavering commitment to equity and justice. Through the lens of David Harris's experience, we begin to grasp the complexity behind policing in America today. It is a story of a man overwhelmed by his role, a society grappling with deep-rooted inequalities, and the vital necessity of transforming institutions to prevent such incidents in the future. The air was heavy with solemnity, thick with the grief of families and comrades mourning the loss of a fallen hero. As Maya Thompson stood in the crowd honoring a life sacrificed for freedom, an unexpected and harrowing moment shattered the sacred stillness. Officer David Harris, his nerves frayed and senses sharpened by years of high-pressure policing, suddenly drew his weapon, the cold steel of his service pistol pointed squarely at Maya. Time seemed to freeze for those who witnessed it. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, and eyes widened in disbelief, hearts pounding in shock. Mothers clasped their children closer, veterans stiffened, and whispers turned to stunned silence. Maya, the steadfast figure of resilience, locked eyes with David, a mixture of calm defiance and unyielding dignity shining through her gaze. She stood tall despite the threat, her breathing steady, refusing to let fear dictate her response. "Put the gun down," a voice cracked from the crowd, a veteran nearby, voice trembling with emotion. Another step forward, hands raised pleading for peace and reason. David's hand trembled slightly. His eyes flickered between the crowd and Maya. The tension was palpable, a powder keg ready to ignite. This moment, raw and unsettling, echoed countless incidents across the United States where split-second decisions fueled by bias led to tragedy. The images flashed through the minds of many present: George Floyd's last breaths, Breonna Taylor's unanswered calls for mercy, and too many others silenced in similar circumstances. The power imbalance was stark. A single man wielded the authority of the law, a symbol of protection. Yet in this instance, it became a tool of intimidation, fear, and potential violence. The crowd's shock was not just about the immediate threat, but about the painful familiarity of such moments, reminders of a history too often marked by racial profiling and misuse of power. Yet Maya's unshaken presence brought a profound contrast here. Was a decorated soldier, a woman who had fought and bled for her country, now confronted by the very institution meant to uphold justice. Whispers spread through the gathering, questions bubbling up silently. Why did this happen? How could such a moment occur in a place meant for honor and remembrance? Behind the scenes, the cameras capturing the moment became crucial evidence, bearing witness to the truth that would soon fuel investigations and demands it bounds for accountability. This tense confrontation was a catalyst, a mirror reflecting deep systemic issues within law enforcement and society at large. It underscored the urgent need for reform, for better training in de-escalation, for confronting ingrained prejudices, and for rebuilding trust between police and communities. But most of all, it revealed the strength of individuals like Maya Thompson, those who stand undeterred in the face of intimidation, who embody courage not just in battlefields, but in moments where their very humanity is challenged. The weight of the gun's cold barrel aimed at her was a stark reminder of the dangers Maya Thompson faced not on a distant battlefield, but here in the heart of her own community. But instead of trembling or retreating, Maya stood firm, embodying a quiet strength that demanded respect. Her breath-steady eyes unwavering, she met Officer David Harris's gaze without fear. To the crowd watching her poise was nothing short of heroic, a beacon of courage amidst chaos. Maya's voice, calm but resolute, broke the tension. "Lower your weapon, officer. This is not how we honor the fallen." There was no anger in her tone, only a clear command born from years of discipline and unshakable conviction. Her military training showed, but more importantly, her unwavering belief in justice and dignity. As whispers rippled through the crowd, Maya reached into her pocket and calmly dialed the number for her commanding officer, a move that surprised many. Even in this threatening moment, she knew the importance of following procedure and keeping a clear record. "Captain, I need immediate assistance at the funeral grounds." She reported, her voice composed despite the gravity of the situation. "An officer has drawn his weapon on me without cause." The crowd sensed a turning point. Maya's refusal to panic, her adherence to protocol under pressure, turned the tide. She was no victim cowering under threat. She was a leader, standing her ground, demanding accountability. Her actions sent a powerful message that no one, regardless of uniform or authority, is above the law or above respect. It was a lesson in resilience and refusing to be broken by fear or intimidation. Nearby voices began to rise, calling for calm and reason. Fellow military personnel and community members rallied behind Maya, their support visible and vocal. In those moments, the power dynamic shifted. The gun, once a symbol of threat, and was overshadowed by the collective strength of dignity, calm, and solidarity. This episode was more than a personal confrontation. It became a vivid illustration of how inner strength and composure can challenge injustice and spark change. Maya's calm defiance would later become a rallying cry, inspiring others to stand firm against discrimination and abuse of power. Her story teaches us that in the face of adversity, it is often our inner resolve, our ability to remain steady and principled, that defines the battle far beyond any physical confrontation. Inshallah. As the tension at the funeral grounds reached a breaking point, the arrival of Police Chief Angela Brooks brought a sudden shift in the atmosphere. A commanding presence Angela was, a woman who had fought her way up the ranks in a system not always welcoming to people like her. Her leadership was defined not by authority alone, but by integrity, fairness, and an unyielding commitment to justice. From the moment she stepped onto the scene, Angela projected calm determination. She had been briefed on the situation moments earlier. An officer had drawn his weapon on a decorated military veteran during a sacred ceremony. To Angela, this was more than just an incident. It was a symbol of the urgent work needed to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the communities they served. Officer Harris put the weapon down immediately. Angela's voice rang out firm, clear, without hesitation. The crowd quieted as her words cut through the charged silence. David hesitated, the weight of the chief's authority settling heavily upon him. The gun lowered slowly, almost reluctantly, as Angela approached him with steady, purposeful steps. Angela didn't just command, she listened. Turning to Maya, she offered a respectful nod and acknowledging the veteran's courage and dignity. Maya, you have my assurance this will be addressed with the seriousness it deserves. Her leadership style was inclusive. She engaged both officers and civilians, mediating tensions and emphasizing transparency. In the ensuing moments, Angela coordinated with her team to secure the area, ensuring that the funeral could proceed without further incident. But Angela's intervention went beyond immediate crisis management. She understood that real leadership meant confronting uncomfortable truths. In a private meeting with Officer Harris, she confronted him with the gravity of his actions, the breach of trust, and the potential consequences, not just for himself, but for the entire department. David, she said, this incident threatens everything we've been working towards: fairness, respect, and community partnership. We must hold ourselves to the highest standards, especially when the world is watching. Angela also held a press conference later that day, addressing the public with honesty and resolve. Our department does not tolerate any form of discrimination or abuse of power, she declared. We are committed to a thorough investigation and accountability at every level. Her words resonated beyond the local community. They were a call to action for law enforcement agencies nationwide grappling with similar issues. Under Angela's guidance, the department initiated immediate reforms, enhanced de-escalation training, bias awareness programs, and stronger community outreach initiatives. Angela Brooks's leadership during this crisis became a model of what responsible, empathetic policing could look like. She proved that true authority comes not from wielding power, but from using it wisely and with compassion. This chapter in the story underscores a vital truth. Leadership matters profoundly in moments of crisis. How those in power respond can either escalate conflict or pave the way for healing and progress. Angela's decisive and transparent response set the stage for justice and reform, offering hope that even deeply rooted problems can be addressed when courage meets accountability. Her actions reminded everyone that change is possible, not through silence or denial, but through facing the hard realities and leading with unwavering integrity. To him, in the aftermath of the shocking incident at the funeral, the city of Detroit found itself under a spotlight. The community demanded answers, and the police department, under Chief Angela Brooks's unwavering leadership, moved swiftly to initiate a thorough and transparent investigation. The investigation team, led by veteran detective Sarah Mitchell, immediately began the painstaking process of piecing together the events of that tense day. Every detail mattered, every second could hold the key to uncovering the truth. The first step was securing and reviewing the extensive video footage from the funeral grounds. Cameras mounted on nearby buildings, smartphones from attendees, and body cameras worn by officers became vital pieces of the puzzle. The grainy images captured the moment David Harris drew his weapon on Maya Thompson, a moment frozen in time, undeniable and stark. Detective Mitchell sat for hours replaying footage, frame by frame, watching the subtle shifts in posture, the fleeting expressions on faces, the escalation from unease to crisis. The video was damning, providing clear evidence that contradicted any claims of justified action by Officer Harris. Alongside the visual evidence, investigators sought out witnesses, friends, family, fellow service members, and civilians present at the scene. Their testimonies painted a vivid picture of the event's emotional gravity. I saw her standing there calm as ever, even when that officer pointed his gun at her, recounted a fellow veteran, his voice heavy with disbelief. It was a moment none of us expected. We were there to mourn, not to fear. Others spoke of the crowd's shock, the gasps, the hurried whispers, and the palpable tension that rippled through the gathering. Each account underscored Maya's composure amidst Kay's and David's sudden, unwarranted aggression. Technology played a crucial role in ensuring transparency throughout the investigation. The department worked closely with independent media outlets and community organizations to provide timely updates, fostering public trust during a moment of heightened scrutiny. Social media amplified the story rapidly, with videos and first-hand accounts spreading nationwide. The digital age turned ordinary citizens into watchdogs, demanding accountability and shining a light on institutional issues often hidden from public view. This confluence of technology and community engagement transformed the investigation from an internal affair into a public testament to the power of collective vigilance. Moreover, the use of forensic analysis examining ballistic evidence, weapon handling, and officer protocols added layers of scientific rigor to the inquiry. Experts weighed in on whether David's actions aligned with departmental guidelines and ethical standards. Throughout the process, Chief Brooks maintained open communication with Maya, her legal team, and community leaders, emphasizing that justice would not be compromised. The investigation was not just about finding fault, it was about upholding the principles that Maya fought for: truth, accountability, and respect for human dignity. By meticulously gathering and analyzing evidence, the team aimed to build an irrefutable case that would not only hold David accountable, but also serve as a catalyst for broader institutional reforms. This phase of the story highlights the indispensable role of evidence and testimony in the pursuit of justice, reminding us that transparency and community involvement are essential pillars in confronting abuse of power. The day of the trial dawned with a heavy atmosphere, as if the very walls of the courtroom bore witness to the weight of the case unfolding inside. The first hearing in what would become a landmark legal battle was about to commence. Maya Thompson entered the courtroom, her composure a mix of steely determination and quiet resolve. This was more than a personal fight, it was a stand for justice, dignity, and the principles she had long dedicated her life to defending. Across the room sat Officer David Harris, his youthful face shadowed by anxiety and defensiveness. The tension between the two was palpable, a clash not only of individuals but of ideals and experiences shaped by vastly different worlds. The prosecution laid out its case with precision, presenting the damning video evidence that captured the moment David drew his weapon without provocation. Witness testimonies echoed Maya's unwavering calm under threat, painting a picture of an unarmed veteran facing unnecessary aggression. Maya's lawyer, Sarah Bennett, articulated the broader implications, emphasizing that this was not an isolated incident, but a reflection of systemic issues plaguing law enforcement, issues of bias, abuse of power, and a failure to uphold the very laws officers swore to protect. David's defense attempted to counter, portraying him as a man overwhelmed by stress and misunderstanding, arguing for leniency, yet the starkness of the evidence and the weight of Maya's courage made this defense seem hollow to many. The courtroom was a stage for more than legal arguments. It became a battleground of emotions. Family members of Maya and fallen soldiers sat with tearful eyes, supporters in the gallery, whispered prayers and words of encouragement. Outside, a growing crowd of community members and activists gathered their signs and chants, a reminder that this trial resonated far beyond the courtroom walls. It was a fight for accountability, respect, and change. Throughout the proceedings, Maya remained dignified. When called to testify, she spoke with clarity and strength, recounting the moment not as a victim, but as a witness to injustice. Her voice carried the weight of lived experience and the hope for a better future. "This isn't just about me," Maya declared. "It's about every person who has ever been made to feel less than human. It's about demanding that those sworn to protect do so without fear or prejudice." The judge listened intently, the courtroom hanging on every word. The legal battle was only beginning, but the message was clear. This case would test the very fabric of justice in Detroit and beyond. The trial marked a turning point, not just in Maya's life, but in the ongoing struggle to confront and dismantle systemic discrimination within law enforcement. It was a testament to the power of resilience, truth, and the unyielding quest for justice in the face of overwhelming odds. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the spotlight shifted sharply onto Officer David Harris and his defense team. Their task was clear: to navigate a treacherous path between the damning evidence and the need to save their client from severe consequences. David's lead attorney, Mark Reynolds, was a seasoned legal strategist known for his aggressive defense tactics. From the outset, Reynolds set the tone, casting doubt on the prosecution's narrative and attempting to reframe the incident as a tragic misunderstanding. The stress and unpredictability of police work cannot be overstated. Reynolds argued during opening statements. Officer Harris acted in a split second under perceived threat. His intentions were never malicious. At the heart of their defense was denial that David's actions were motivated by bias or misconduct. Instead, they painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by pressure, responding instinctively in a situation he perceived as dangerous. Reynolds sought to exploit every ambiguity in the evidence. He questioned the angles of surveillance footage, suggested potential misinterpretations of witness statements, and emphasized the chaos of the scene to argue for reasonable doubt. Moreover, the defense aimed to humanize David, presenting his service record and community ties as evidence of his good character. They portrayed him as a dedicated officer caught in the complexities and dangers of modern policing. Throughout the trial, Reynolds used common legal tactics seen in high-profile cases involving law enforcement, shifting blame onto procedural misunderstandings, highlighting moments of uncertainty, and questioning the credibility of witnesses. Yet these strategies carried risks. In an era where public scrutiny on police conduct was intense, the defense's approach faced fierce opposition, not only from the prosecution, but from the community and media watching closely. One of the critical pitfalls of such defense tactics is the risk of appearing to excuse or minimize serious misconduct. For many observers, the focus on technicalities and character defenses failed to address the fundamental issue, the unnecessary escalation that placed Maya in danger. David himself wrestled with the unfolding proceedings. While his legal team crafted arguments, he faced the emotional toll of public scrutiny, community backlash, and his own conscience. His statements at times revealed confusion and regret, but also defensiveness and internal conflict common among officers involved in controversial incidents. This defense phase illuminates broader challenges in the justice system when confronting law enforcement misconduct. The legal shield often built around officers can complicate accountability, especially when unions and political interests come into play. Reynolds also leveraged the powerful support of the police union, which mounted a vigorous campaign to defend David. Union representatives argued for due process, cautioning against hasty judgments that could undermine morale and effectiveness within the force. Such union involvement, while intended to protect officers' rights, often fuels tensions between the pursuit of justice and the protection of institutional interests. It raises important questions about how to balance fair representation with accountability in cases of abuse of power. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a microcosm of the larger national debate over policing, racial bias, and systemic reform. Each legal maneuver reflected underlying societal struggles, making the case far more than a personal dispute. It was a battle over the soul of American law enforcement. Through it all, Maya's camp remained resolute, countering defense claims with unwavering commitment to truth and justice. Their determination highlighted the essential role of victims and advocates in pushing beyond legal defenses to confront real harm and demand change. This part of the story underscores the complexity and emotional intensity of legal battles surrounding police misconduct. It challenges listeners to consider the intricate interplay of law, emotion, power, and public perception, and the urgent need for reforms that prioritize transparency and fairness. In the heart of Detroit's ongoing saga, the police union emerged as a powerful force, an institution that traditionally stands as the guardian of officers' rights and job security. The union's involvement in the case of Officer David Harris introduced a complex layer to the unfolding drama, complicating efforts toward transparency and justice. The union, officially known as the Detroit Police Officers Association, DPOA, swiftly mobilized to defend David Harris. Their initial public statements emphasized the importance of due process, warning against premature judgments fueled by media frenzy and public pressure. "We stand by our members, especially in difficult times," declared the union president during a press briefing. "Officer Harris deserves a fair trial and protection against any unjust treatment." Behind the scenes, the union's legal team worked tirelessly, leveraging every procedural safeguard to protect Harris from severe disciplinary actions or criminal charges. Their strategy included rigorous scrutiny of the investigation process, demanding strict adherence to departmental policies and challenging any evidence that appeared flawed or incomplete. The union's influence extended deep into the police department's internal affairs, raising significant questions about the balance of power. While unions play a vital role in advocating for fair labor practices and shielding officers from unfair treatment, their involvement in cases of misconduct often presents a double-edged sword. Community activists and legal advocates criticize the union's aggressive defense, arguing it sometimes serves as a barrier to accountability. They pointed to a pattern where union protections contributed to the perpetuation of harmful behaviors by shielding officers from consequences. The situation exposed the tension between protecting individual officers and safeguarding public trust. For many in Detroit, the union's defense of David Harris felt like an obstacle to justice, a symbol of institutional resistance to reform. Within the police department, this dynamic created further strain. Officers who supported reform and accountability often found themselves caught between loyalty to colleagues and the need to address systemic issues. The union's stance could embolden some officers while alienating others seeking change. Chief Angela Brooks faced a daunting challenge navigating these waters. She understood that meaningful reform required cooperation across the ranks, but also recognized the union's power to influence outcomes, sometimes in ways that conflicted with transparency and justice. In private meetings, Brooks pushed for open dialogue with union leaders, advocating for policies that balance protection of officers with the imperative for accountability. She sought to cultivate a culture where ethical behavior and community trust were prioritized without compromising fair treatment. This balancing act underscored the complexities leaders face in law enforcement today, trying to reform systems entrenched with long-standing traditions and power structures. The union's role in the case of Officer Harris illuminated broader national debates about police unions. Critics called for reforms to union contracts that often include provisions making it difficult to discipline or remove officers accused of misconduct. Supporters argued that unions are essential for protecting officers from unfair political or public backlash, emphasizing the stressful and dangerous nature of policing. As the trial continued, the union's presence remained a significant factor, shaping proceedings and public perception. Their defense efforts influenced legal tactics, negotiation strategies, and the overall narrative surrounding the case. For Maya Thompson and her supporters, the union's involvement represented one of many hurdles on the path to justice. Yet it also highlighted the need for community engagement and legislative action to address systemic barriers to accountability. This chapter in the story reveals the intricate interplay between labor rights, institutional power, and the pursuit of justice, an essential context for understanding the challenges faced by those demanding change in modern policing. It serves as a call to listeners to recognize the complexities behind headlines and to advocate for balanced reforms that protect both the rights of officers and the communities they serve. I ma'am. The streets of Detroit pulsed with an energy unlike any the city had seen in recent years. What began as whispers of outrage over the incident at the funeral quickly grew into a powerful movement, a wave of solidarity and hope that swept through neighborhoods, schools, churches, and workplaces alike. From the moment news of Officer David Harris's reckless act reached the public, Detroit's residents refused to remain silent. They saw in Maya Thompson's struggle a reflection of their own frustrations and aspirations, a fight against injustice that transcended a single incident and touched the very core of their community's pain and resilience. The first rallies were small but spirited. A few hundred people gathered at the city's Central Park holding signs emblazoned with messages like "Justice for Maya" and "End police violence." Faces of all ages and backgrounds lit up with determination, their voices raised in chants demanding accountability. As days passed, these gatherings multiplied. What started locally gained national attention, inspiring marches and demonstrations in cities across the country. Social media platforms exploded with support, hashtags trending, stories shared, and calls to action spreading like wildfire. Churches opened their doors for vigils. Schools organized forums on justice and equality. Local artists created murals honoring Maya in the larger movement for change. The community's response was not just loud, it was deeply heartfelt and inclusive. In one memorable moment, a group of veterans, many who had served alongside Maya, or in similar capacities, stood at the forefront of a massive demonstration. Their presence underscored the gravity of the issue and bridged the gap between military service and civilian life, a testament to unity and shared values. Throughout this surge of activism, the media played a dual role. Responsible journalists highlighted the facts, shared personal stories from the community, and held officials accountable. Yet misinformation and biased coverage also posed challenges, reminding everyone of the ongoing battle for truth in a fragmented information landscape. Local leaders, clergy, and activists formed coalitions working tirelessly to maintain peaceful protests and channel public energy into constructive dialogue with policymakers and law enforcement agencies. Their efforts emphasized that change was not just about confrontation, but about building bridges. The community's unwavering support had a tangible impact. It pressured the police department to maintain transparency, pushed lawmakers to consider reforms, and gave Maya the emotional strength to continue her fight. Importantly, this grassroots movement demonstrated the power of collective action. It highlighted how a united community could hold institutions accountable and demand justice beyond the confines of courtrooms and official investigations. In the face of systemic challenges, Detroit's residents showed resilience, not only by standing against injustice, but by envisioning a future where equity and respect were foundational. This chapter in Maya's story reminds listeners that change is often born from the courage of ordinary people coming together. It calls on us all to recognize our power and we unite in pursuit of justice and equality. Through the collective voice of a city, Maya's struggle became a beacon, a testament to the enduring spirit of community and the relentless pursuit of a fairer world. The story of Maya Thompson and Officer David Harris unfolds against a much larger and more troubling backdrop, a nation grappling with the persistent shadow of racial bias in its law enforcement institutions. To truly understand what happened in Detroit, one must confront the systemic forces at play, forces that have shaped policing in America for generations. Racial bias within police departments is not an isolated problem. It is embedded in the historical and social fabric of the country. From the early days of policing, which in many areas began as an enforcement arm of segregation and control over marginalized communities, to present-day disparities in arrests, use of force, and sentencing, the evidence is stark and undeniable. Studies have repeatedly shown that Black Americans are disproportionately stopped, searched, and subjected to force by police compared to their white counterparts. These disparities are not merely statistical anomalies, but manifestations of deep-rooted prejudices, implicit biases, and institutional practices that continue to influence behavior at every level. The tragic deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor ignited a global reckoning with these realities. George Floyd's last moments under the knee of a Minneapolis officer sparked worldwide protests, a surge of advocacy, and calls for comprehensive reform. Breonna Taylor's shooting in Louisville similarly expose deadly gaps in accountability and transparency. Maya's case in Detroit echoes many of these themes: unwarranted suspicion, escalation of force against a black individual, and a breach of trust by those sworn to protect. It serves as a painful reminder that despite decades of activism and policy efforts, racial bias remains a profound challenge within policing. The consequences are far-reaching. Beyond the immediate harm to individuals and families, racial bias erodes community trust, hampers effective policing, and perpetuates cycles of inequality and unrest. Communities of color often live with the daily reality of suspicion and fear, undermining the very principles of justice and protection that law enforcement should uphold. Addressing this issue requires more than surface-level changes. It demands a fundamental transformation in training, recruitment, accountability measures, and community engagement. It means confronting uncomfortable truths about systemic racism and dedicating resources to dismantling it at every level. In the Courtroom and Beyond, Maya's story adds a vital voice to this ongoing struggle. It challenges listeners to see beyond individual incidents and recognize the broader patterns that demand urgent attention. By comparing Maya's experience with the widely publicized cases of Floyd and Taylor, we see a continuum of persistent failure to safeguard the rights and dignity of Black Americans. These stories collectively underscore the need for vigilance, advocacy, and reform. They also highlight the power of storytelling and testimony in driving change. Each voice raised in protest, each narrative told, chips away at the structures of injustice, building momentum toward a future where equality under the law is not just aspirational but real. This chapter invites reflection on the role each of us can play, whether as activists, policymakers, or citizens, in addressing racial bias in policing, in fostering a society where justice is truly blind and accessible to all. Behind the badge and uniform stood David Harris, a 30-year-old officer whose personal story is often overshadowed by the controversy surrounding his actions. To understand how the tragic incident at the Detroit funeral unfolded, we must delve into the pressures, experiences, and mindset that shaped David's decisions. David grew up in a working-class neighborhood with dreams of serving and protecting his community. Joining the police force was for him a calling and a way to make a positive impact. Yet from his early days on the ball, the reality proved more complicated than he had imagined. The daily stress of policing in a city like Detroit, marked by high crime rates, economic challenges, and deep social divides, took a toll on David's mental and emotional well-being. Long hours, repeated exposure to violence, and a culture that often rewarded toughness over empathy weighed heavily on him. Moreover, David's training and environment did not adequately prepare him for the complexities of interacting with diverse communities. Implicit biases, stereotypes, and a lack of comprehensive cultural competency education contributed to misunderstandings and escalations. On that fateful day at the funeral, these factors converged. David's split-second decision to draw his weapon was fueled not only by fear, but also by ingrained prejudices and insufficient training to de-escalate tense situations involving people of color. In interviews following the incident, David expressed confusion and regret, acknowledging his shortcomings, but also revealing a lack of awareness about how systemic issues influence his behavior. His story highlights a critical gap in law enforcement, the urgent need for ongoing robust training in cultural sensitivity, implicit bias, and conflict resolution. Without these tools, even well-intentioned officers can fall prey to harmful assumptions and make devastating mistakes. David's experience serves as a cautionary tale for police departments nationwide. It underscores the importance of addressing not only individual accountability, but also the systemic conditions that shape officers' perceptions and actions. Beyond policy and procedure, fostering empathy and understanding within police culture is essential. Officers must be equipped to recognize their biases, engage respectfully with all community members, and prioritize de-escalation to prevent unnecessary violence. This chapter reminds listeners that police reform requires a holistic approach, one that considers human psychology, social context, and the lived realities of both officers and the communities they serve. David's journey is not an excuse but a call to action. It challenges us to rethink how law enforcement is trained and supported with the goal of preventing future tragedies and building bridges of trust. Through understanding stories like David's, we gain insight into the complex dynamics at play and the path forward toward justice and reconciliation. The incident that unfolded at the funeral in Detroit did not simply conclude with courtroom battles and media headlines. It sent ripples far beyond those moments, touching the lives of Maya Thompson, David Harris, their families, and the wider community in profound and lasting ways. For Maya, the experience was a harrowing confrontation with injustice, one that tested her resilience but also strengthened her resolve. As a decorated veteran and civil rights advocate, she understood that this personal trial was part of a larger struggle against systemic inequality. Yet the trauma was undeniable. The flash of the gun, the sense of threat in a place meant for mourning, left psychological scars. Maya found herself grappling with moments of anxiety flashbacks and an unshakable vigilance born from being targeted, despite her service and sacrifice. Her family became both a refuge and a source of strength. Late-night conversations, shared tears, and steadfast support helped Maya navigate the emotional aftermath. Her husband, a fellow veteran, stood unwaveringly by her side, reinforcing the importance of solidarity and love during times of crisis. For David Harris, the consequences were equally severe, but markedly different. Public scrutiny, professional suspension, and the weight of his actions bore heavily on him. His family endured the sting of social backlash, the painful divide between loyalty and condemnation. David's internal struggle unfolded in private moments of regret, self-reflection, and attempts to reconcile his intentions with the devastating impact of his choices. The once confident officer now faced a future uncertain and fraught with the consequences of a split-second decision. The wider community of Detroit, that are already scarred by years of systemic inequities, experienced a renewed reckoning. Protests and calls for reform intensified as citizens demanded accountability and meaningful change within the police force. Yet amidst the anger and frustration, there was also a collective effort toward healing. Community leaders, activists, and officials collaborated on initiatives aimed at bridging divides, promoting dialogue, mental health support, and programs focused on rebuilding trust. Maya took an active role in this healing process, speaking at forums, participating in workshops, and mentoring young people about resilience and civic engagement. Her journey became a symbol of empowerment and the possibility of transformation through adversity. For David, rehabilitation meant undergoing counseling, diversity training, and engaging with community outreach efforts, steps toward understanding the deep implications of his actions and striving for personal growth. The police department, under Chief Angela Brooks's guidance, committed to systemic reforms, enhanced training protocols, improved accountability mechanisms, and fostering a culture that prioritized respect and empathy. This phase of the story highlights that while justice is a critical milestone, true resolution requires ongoing commitment to repair the social fabric and address the wounds left by such incidents. It reminds us that individuals are not isolated actors, but part of complex systems and healing demands to a collective effort between victims, perpetrators, communities, and institutions. The aftermath of Maya and David's story serves as a microcosm of the broader challenges faced nationwide. It emphasizes the necessity of compassion, open dialogue, and unwavering dedication to equity as pillars for building a just society. This chapter invites listeners to reflect on the human cost of injustice and the profound power of resilience, forgiveness, and reform in shaping a better future. The final courtroom echoed with the heavy weight of anticipation and hope. Months of investigations, testimonies, and legal battles had led to this decisive moment, the moment when justice would finally be rendered for Maya Thompson and the Detroit community she represented. Maya sat quietly, her face a blend of fatigue and steadfast determination. This was the culmination of a journey filled with pain, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. Around her, family, friends, and supporters filled the gallery, their collective presence, a testament to the power of solidarity and the demand for accountability. Across the room, David Harris faced the consequences of his actions. The youthful confidence that once marked his early days on the force was now replaced by a somber acceptance of the gravity of his decisions. The prosecution laid bare the facts once more, presenting the video evidence, witness statements, and expert analyses that made clear the reckless and unjustified nature of David's conduct. The narrative was irrefutable: an officer who abused his power and endangered a decorated veteran during a sacred ceremony. As the judge delivered the verdict, the room held its breath. The sentence was severe but fitting: immediate termination from the police force and a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The decision sent a clear message: abuse of authority and racial bias would not be tolerated. Maya's eyes welled with tears, not just from relief, but from the emotional weight of justice served. Her voice trembled slightly as she addressed the court, thanking the community legal teams and advocates who stood by her. "This verdict is more than a personal victory," Maya said. "It's a step toward healing, accountability, and a better future for all who face injustice." Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. Crowds gathered, cheering, chanting, and celebrating the outcome that many had feared might never come. For the Detroit community and beyond, it was a moment of triumph and a beacon of hope in the ongoing fight against systemic racism. Yet even in victory, there was recognition that this was not the end. The sentencing sparked renewed calls for reform, better training, stronger oversight, and systemic changes to prevent future abuses. The story of Maya Thompson and David Harris became a landmark case cited in discussions about police reform nationwide. It illustrated the profound impact one individual's courage can have in challenging entrenched systems of power. This chapter closes with the affirmation that justice, while sometimes delayed, can prevail when communities unite, leaders act with integrity, and truth is relentlessly pursued. It calls on listeners to remember that justice is not a destination, but a continuous journey, one that requires vigilance, empathy, and unwavering commitment from all of us. In the aftermath of the trial and the intense public scrutiny it sparked, one figure stood out not only for her decisive actions during the crisis, but also for the broader leadership lessons she embodied: Police Chief Angela Brooks. Her handling of the incident involving Officer David Harris and Maya Thompson became a case study in leadership under pressure, transparency, and accountability. Angela Brooks had long understood that leadership in law enforcement is a delicate balance between enforcing order and cultivating trust. When the crisis erupted at the Detroit funeral, she faced a daunting test to manage a situation charged with racial tension, public outrage, and internal conflict within the police force. Her approach was rooted in clear principles: fairness, openness, and a commitment to justice that transcended politics or personal loyalties. From the moment she learned of the incident, Angela prioritized swift action, ensuring Maya's safety, ordering an immediate investigation, and making it clear that misconduct would not be tolerated. She communicated directly with the public, refusing to hide behind bureaucratic silence. In press conferences, Angela spoke candidly about the challenges the department faced, acknowledged systemic issues, and promised concrete steps toward reform. "Leadership is not about protecting the institution at all costs," she stated in one memorable address. "It's about protecting the people, both those who serve and those who are served. Transparency and accountability are not optional. They are our obligation." Angela's leadership style contrasted sharply with some historical instances where law enforcement leaders have deflected responsibility or minimized incidents to preserve reputations. Her willingness to confront uncomfortable truths and engage with community concerns set a new standard. Internally, she worked to bridge divides, encouraging officers to embrace reforms, participate in bias training, and listen to community voices. Her message was clear: the department could not continue business as usual if it wanted to regain public trust. Her actions had a ripple effect beyond Detroit. Agencies across the country cited Angela Brooks as an example of responsible leadership amid crises involving race and policing. Her tenure sparked conversations about how police chiefs and leaders could shape culture, policy, and community relations proactively. Angela's story illustrates that leadership in moments of crisis is not just about managing events, but about embodying values that inspire change. It requires courage to face criticism, humility to admit flaws, and steadfastness to pursue justice even when it is difficult. For the community, Angela's transparent and fair leadership was a beacon of hope, proof that institutions could evolve and that justice could be served when those at the helm acted with integrity. This chapter calls on listeners to reflect on what leadership truly means in the context of public service, the heavy responsibility to protect, to listen, and to act with honesty and fairness. Angela Brooks's legacy reminds us all that effective leadership can transform crisis into opportunity, mistrust into partnership, and conflict into progress. So, in the months following the harrowing incident at the Detroit funeral, Maya Thompson's life took on a new rhythm, one defined by resilience, purpose, and a commitment to healing not just herself, but the community around her. So, the trauma of being threatened with a weapon by an officer, an institution she had once revered, left scars both visible and invisible. Yet Maya refused to be defined by fear or victimhood. Instead, she embraced a path of restoration and advocacy that would transform her pain into powerful action. Returning to her career as a military strategist and public speaker, Maya found renewed meaning in sharing her story not merely as a recounting of injustice, but as a beacon of hope for those who have faced discrimination and abuse. Her voice carried weight, echoing in conferences, community gatherings, and legislative halls. She became a fierce advocate for police reform, emphasizing the importance of cultural competence, training, de-escalation techniques, and community policing. Maya's message was clear. True strength lies not in force, but in understanding and respect. Her personal journey was marked by moments of introspection and growth. Therapy sessions helped her confront the lingering trauma, while the unwavering support of her family and friends bolstered her spirit. Maya also dedicated time to mentoring young people in Detroit, especially those from marginalized backgrounds, encouraging them to pursue leadership roles and civic engagement. She believed that empowerment begins with education and opportunity. Despite the public attention and demands on her time, Maya maintained a grounded presence. She sought to balance advocacy with self-care, recognizing that sustainable change requires both inner strength and external action. Her story became intertwined with a larger movement, one that embraced resilience as a form of resistance and hope as a catalyst for transformation. Maya's journey also illustrated the complex interplay of justice and healing. While legal victories offered validation, the deeper work involved rebuilding trust and fostering reconciliation within a community deeply affected by systemic issues. Her resilience inspired many, reminding listeners that overcoming injustice is not a solitary battle, but a collective endeavor, fueled by courage, solidarity, and unwavering belief in a better future. This chapter invites reflection on the power of perseverance and the importance of using one's voice to advocate for change. Maya's experience stands as a testament to the human spirit's capacity to rise above adversity and lead with compassion. The verdict in Maya Thompson's case sent shockwaves not only through Detroit, but also across the nation, reigniting urgent conversations about police reform and the urgent need for systemic change. This moment became a catalyst for examining how law enforcement agencies operate and how communities interact with those sworn to protect them. In the months following the trial, a wave of initiatives emerged aimed at addressing the root causes of incidents like the one that threatened Maya's life. Police departments across the country began implementing comprehensive training programs focused on de-escalation techniques, cultural competency, and implicit bias awareness. One of the most significant shifts was the adoption of scenario-based training that put officers in simulated high-pressure situations, teaching them to recognize and counteract their own biases while prioritizing communication over force. This hands-on approach sought to reduce knee-jerk reactions and promote thoughtful decision-making. Legislators, both at state and federal levels, introduced bills mandating greater transparency and accountability within police departments. These laws aim to improve data collection on police encounters, standardize use of force protocols, and ensure independent oversight bodies had real power to investigate misconduct. Technology played a transformative role in these reforms. Body-worn cameras became standard issue, providing crucial evidence during investigations and helping to build trust through transparency. Additionally, data analytics tools were developed to identify patterns of behavior within departments, flagging officers who might need additional training or disciplinary action. Communities empowered by these technological advancements took on more active roles in oversight. Civilian review boards gained traction, allowing residents to participate directly in holding police accountable. This democratization of oversight was seen as a vital step toward rebuilding fractured relationships between law enforcement and marginalized groups. Public forums and town halls proliferated, offering spaces for dialogue, healing, and collaborative problem solving. These gatherings brought together police officials, community leaders, activists, and everyday citizens to share perspectives and develop solutions rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Media coverage shifted from sensationalism to responsible reporting, emphasizing facts, context, and voices from affected communities. Documentaries, podcasts, and investigative journalism played key roles in educating the public and sustaining momentum for reform. However, challenges remained. Resistance from some factions within law enforcement, political hurdles, and deeply ingrained cultural attitudes presented obstacles that required persistent advocacy and community engagement to overcome. Maya Thompson herself became a prominent advocate for these reforms, using her platform to call for continued vigilance and action. Her story underscored that justice is not achieved solely through court verdicts, but through sustained efforts to transform institutions. The reforms inspired by Maya's case are part of a broader ongoing movement toward a policing model that values empathy, accountability, and partnership with communities rather than domination and fear. This chapter invites listeners to recognize the multifaceted nature of police reform, emphasizing that change requires commitment from all levels, from policymakers to rank-and-file officers, and from activists to ordinary citizens. By embracing new training methods, leveraging technology, and fostering genuine community involvement, society can move closer to a future where safety and justice coexist for all. In the ongoing quest to reform policing and address deep-seated racial biases, one truth has become increasingly clear. Meaningful change starts with education and communication. The legacy of Maya Thompson's case serves as a poignant reminder that systemic problems cannot be solved solely through punitive measures. They require a foundational shift in how law enforcement officers are trained to perceive and interact with the communities they serve. Across the country, police departments are now investing heavily in cultural competency programs designed to foster understanding, empathy, and respect for diversity. These programs go beyond simple awareness. They seek to challenge and dismantle implicit biases that often operate beneath conscious awareness. One such initiative is the Fair and Impartial Policing Project, which has been implemented in multiple states. This program combines evidence-based training with ongoing support, helping officers recognize automatic judgments and develop alternative, unbiased responses. Role-playing scenarios, group discussions, and feedback mechanisms create an immersive learning environment. In addition to training, communication strategies have evolved to emphasize community engagement in dialogue. Police forces are encouraging officers to spend time in neighborhoods, not just enforcing laws, but building relationships, listening to concerns, understanding cultural contexts, and collaborating on safety initiatives. For example, the Camden County Police Department in New Jersey underwent a dramatic overhaul after disbanding and reforming with a community-focused approach. Officers receive extensive training on cultural humility and participate in neighborhood events, transforming their role from adversaries to allies. Crime rates dropped and public trust soared, a powerful testament to the impact of education and communication. Education also extends beyond officers to the communities themselves. Workshops on citizens' rights, conflict resolution, and how to effectively interact with law enforcement empower residents to advocate for themselves while reducing misunderstandings. Moreover, efforts to include diverse voices in recruitment are helping build police forces that better reflect the communities they serve. When officers come from similar backgrounds and experiences, the chances of empathy and cultural insight naturally increase. But challenges remain. Deep-rooted stereotypes and historical mistrust cannot be undone overnight. Training must be ongoing, reinforced by leadership committed to transparency and accountability. Without this, programs risk becoming performative rather than transformative. Technology plays a complementary role in education. Virtual reality simulations now allow officers to experience encounters from the perspective of civilians, offering visceral lessons in the emotional impact of bias and force. Data analytics help identify officers who may benefit from additional training or support. Maya Thompson's experience continues to inspire these reforms. Her courage has highlighted the urgent need for education that addresses bias at its core, transforming attitudes before they lead to tragic consequences. This chapter underscores that police reform is not just about changing policies, but about changing minds and hearts through education dialogue and genuine human connection. For listeners, it is a call to support and advocate for programs that foster understanding and inclusivity within law enforcement, recognizing that erasing prejudice begins with conscious effort and sustained commitment. Together, through education and communication, society can forge a new path, one where justice is truly equitable, and the bonds between police and community are built on trust and mutual respect. As we reach the final chapter of Maya Thompson's story, a story marked by courage, struggle, and the relentless pursuit of justice, we are reminded that this is not just her journey alone. It is a call that echoes across communities, demanding each of us confront the realities of racial injustice and the urgent need for change. Justice at its core is about dignity, the recognition that every human being deserves respect, safety, and equality under the law. Maya's experience exposes the painful truth that these fundamental rights are still denied to many based on the color of their skin or the assumptions of those who hold power. Her courage in standing up to injustice is a beacon for all who face oppression. It reminds us that change is possible when we refuse to be silent, when we speak truth to power, and when we hold institutions accountable for their actions. But courage alone is not enough. The fight against systemic racism requires collective action, a community awakening that challenges old biases and builds new foundations for fairness. This moment calls on each listener to ask themselves, what role will I play in this fight? How will I stand up when I witness injustice? How can I contribute to creating communities where everyone is treated with equity and respect? It is a call to speak out against racial discrimination, not just when it makes headlines, but every day in schools, workplaces, neighborhoods, and online. It is an invitation to educate ourselves and others, to listen with empathy, and to engage in honest dialogue. Building a just society means rejecting complacency and embracing responsibility. It means supporting policies and leaders who prioritize reform, transparency, and community trust. It means standing with those who have been marginalized and amplifying their voices. Maya's story is a testament to the power of individual and collective resilience. It shows that even in the darkest moments, hope can ignite change and justice can prevail. As this story closes, let it serve as a reminder that the journey toward equality is ongoing. It is a path that requires vigilance, courage, and unwavering commitment. Together, we can be the changemakers, champions of justice who refuse to accept anything less than a society where all people are truly free and equal. If this story moved you, if it stirred something deep within, I urge you to share it. Talk about it. Advocate for it. Let Maya's courage inspire action in your community and beyond. Remember, silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Your voice matters. Your actions matter. And together we can build a future defined not by division, but by dignity and unity. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to stay informed, engaged, and empowered in the fight for justice. Because sometimes the loudest roar for change begins with a single courageous voice. Will you be that voice? Before you go, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because silence only helps injustice thrive. Remember this? Every system that tolerates racism is a ticking time bomb. The question is, will you stand by, or will you be the spark that sets it off? Subscribe now. The fight for justice needs your voice.